I live in a country with a very long maternity leave and it's not that great. Today, I want to talk about having a long maternity leave because we as Americans don't have it and people who do have the audacity to complain about it. And I say that in jest because I genuinely want to understand what's happening that would make someone say, I live in a country with a very long maternity leave and it's not that great. But to get to that, let's do two things first. The first is to level set as to what's the current status in America. What do you have access to when you give birth?
All right, countries, I want to know what kind of maternity leave you offer. So France, you first. Bah, ça dépend un peu, mais en gros, c'est entre 16 et 26 semaines. Very good. Spain, you're next. Sí, en España tenemos 16 semanas. Very good. Brazil, you're up next. Sim, no Brasil temos 120 dias de licença maternidade. The United States? What? The same question I asked everyone else. Do you provide maternity leave? Oh, yeah, duh, obviously. 12 weeks. Wonderful. So every worker gets 12 weeks. Oh, everyone? No. The law that we have, it applies to like 54% of workers. 54%? That's barely more than half. And it's paid? Oh, wait, you guys were talking about paid maternity leave?
As someone who experienced a very long maternity leave by American standards, I would go insofar as to advise people who want to have families to select their employers by the benefits that they offer and not maybe your passions or interests. And if you think that is extreme, I would direct you to TikToks or people advocating for their experiences joining Starbucks as a barista in order to have access to IVF benefits.
It's my first day of work at Starbucks for fertility benefits, so I can pay for IVF.
Laura Shaheen here, reproductive endocrinologist and IVF specialist. And yes, my patients do seek out employers who will pay for fertility benefits.
But I digress. Let's focus on maternity leave benefits in this video. First thing first, America does not have any federal policy that guarantees any kind of paid leave after birth. The Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993 requires employers to provide up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave, which means you have job security. They can't fire you, but no one's gonna help you either. Maybe at least you get to keep your health insurance. Now, a number of states have chosen to offer paid family leave. These tend to be on the East Coast or the West Coast, and quote, they typically cover a portion of your paycheck for 8 to 12 weeks, and the remainder of your paycheck might be covered by your employer, sharing that responsibility between the government and the employer. Now, for the employer, what it looks like to have a supportive one, or a section that I like to call unicorns that do exist. First of all, I had an accommodation that allowed me to work from home while I was pregnant. Second of all, I availed that prepartum leave, which is 4 weeks before your expected due date. And if you go past that, so my baby was actually born a week late, I actually got 5 weeks of fully paid prepartum leave. Many tech companies in California do offer prepartum leave as an option. After birth, my company offered 16 weeks of paid leave, but only 10 if you were with the company for less than a year, which I was. After my 10 weeks were up, I actually went on state disability leave, so thank you, state of California, for that option. And after that, I also got to choose between a ramp up program, which is either 50 or 75% of your paycheck and of your hours for 8 weeks, up to 8 weeks. Ultimately, all of these different leave options can add up to somewhere up to 6 months of leave at different levels of pay. This is probably somewhere close to the max that anyone could ever find in the US. How on earth could someone not want this? Let's find out. The person in question shares her story on Reddit saying, I live in a country where it's common, very common, for mothers to stay at home with a new child for around 3 years. During the first 6 to 7 months, the government supports you with about 70% of your net salary. This period is called maternity leave. Once finished, you apply for parental leave. There is the same budget per person assigned by state, and you can spread this money out anywhere between 8 months up to 3 years. The later being the majority's choice. So you understand the longer you stay home, the less money you get. It goes anywhere from okay-ish to some pocket money. It's funny because as an American, I do not consider any free money to be like, quote, beep pocket money.
As if I couldn't be disappointed by this country enough, in addition to only receiving 12 weeks unpaid maternity leave, my short-term disability insurance claim was denied because when I accepted this job and signed up for the insurance policy, I was unknowingly days pregnant. So it's considered a pre-existing condition.
The article goes on, the majority of moms stay fully at home with their kid all the way until 3 years of age, until they are eligible for kindergarten. I'm one of those that chose a different approach and faced a lot of obstacles doing so. I really believe there are tons of disadvantages coming from this system. Listen, being a minority, no matter what minority that is tough, especially when your thinking and your choices go against the grain. I would say in contrast, America is such a mixed bag because you can either go to work and be surrounded by all of the career moms, or you can go straight to the playground and find your group of stay-at-home moms. But if you are surrounded by the opposite group, it will feel icky. A lot of the shame that comes in parenthood, the judgment comes so easily because people are seeking reassurance that they're doing the right thing, and having people literally embody the exact opposite choice makes you confront your fear of insufficiency, of inadequacy on a daily basis.
I went from being a working mom to a stay-at-home mom about a year ago, and for the first 6 to 9 months, I absolutely hated it. For context, I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. At the time, they were 6 months and 3.5. I have a lot of guilt about it. You don't need to make me feel guilty. And
I've cried 3 times this morning. Why, Taylor? Other than just being mentally unstable, why are you crying 3 times in one morning? It's only 9:30. Probably because I just dropped my baby off at daycare for the first time. And my 4-year-old, he's been there, but my baby's never been. Why is he going? Because I have to work. Life of a working mom, working single mom. And I cried before I dropped him off. I walked in with tears in my eyes. I'm like this. Cried when I was in there because, cry baby's hay. And then I cried when I walked out.
Author starts listing out the reasons. One is societal pressure. It is deeply rooted in people's beliefs that a mom should stay home for 3 years. There's a lot of mom shaming towards those that don't. I've experienced it. People don't really encourage balance in the life of mothers. Being a stay-at-home mom, first of all, is so tough. It is so natural for people to seek balance, and even many people saying that going to your job, if you have a desk job, sitting at a desk job for 8 hours is easier than managing the emotions and the energy of small children.
I just found out that stay-at-home parents produce more cortisol, the stress hormone, than 98% of the world's paying professions. I want you to remember that. Next time you're feeling guilty or needing a break.
Lately, I've also seen a rise in programs in America focused on flexible scheduling for moms, remote opportunities, project-based work to capture the human potential, the human capital of the moms who are able to work, and maybe want to work, but also want to have balance with their children. But again, these kind of initiatives, these groups are very American. I imagine that they're not found widely everywhere in the world. 2, she quotes financial difficulties. Being on a very low income for multiple years, financial responsibility almost completely shifted on the partner. There are several points on her disadvantageous list that I think we should keep separate from the argument that a long maternity leave is detrimental, because the struggles of being a stay-at-home parent are difficult no matter how long your maternity leave is. So in essence, in her disadvantageous points, she continues talking about the societal pressure that leads people to make decisions against what they would be naturally comfortable with. OP, original poster, is saying that she doesn't like feeling the pressure to give up the flexibility of her paycheck, the flexibility of a dual income home. Her third point is career stalling and women in reproductive age experiencing problems when looking for jobs, even though a law should protect them against this, since the employers expect you to soon check out for 3 years or more if you have kids. Now, obviously this is illegal, but just because something is illegal doesn't mean that it doesn't exist in real life and how people view employees, especially young women in their 20s and in their 30s. However, I would say culturally, it doesn't seem to be as big of a problem where I am in America. Again, I keep bringing up America because this whole environment is so different. In my country, there are so many articles being published about people having 1 or 2 kids or having no kids at all, deferring kids until it becomes either too difficult or just no longer in the cards. It seems to be less of a problem in a society where the culture is more of a mixed bag. I would not accept, I would question the argument against career stalling in this instance because it is career stalling if you planned for a promotion or some kind of big job, some kind of big project in the next 3 years. Outside of that, it is clearly just a 3-year deferral. And the reason that I say that is because, again, I want to keep it separate from this argument about having kids in general. Like, we're not talking about whether or not I should have kids will stall your career. We're talking about a maternity leave that is longer, women taking more time off of work and then potentially missing out on those 3 years of opportunities, which is not fair to label that as career stalling. But what do you think? I'll keep going. This one I really disagree with. She's saying lack of childcare services and high prices due to a low demand for childcare under 3 years. Oh my gosh, if I could just clap back here and say, you know what debatably is even harder? It is when childcare is full and no one's accepting any new kids or else charging an arm and a leg. I was reading in California, the average daycare expense is $2,500 per month. It ranges anywhere from maybe $2,000 or $1,800 as the minimum, all the way up to, you know, $3-4 grand. And that's not even like a crazy private school. That's just a kindergarten down the block, a daycare down the block.
My husband and I spend $70,000 a year on childcare, and people want to know, how do we afford it? A woman in my town's Facebook group shared these daycare rates today, and she said, how do you afford kids here? Because nobody knows how anybody is paying for this. For an infant for 5 days a week with 10 hours of care, it is $664 a week. That is just shy of $35,000 a year for one child.
And I do think that the cultures where being a stay-at-home mom is more prevalent will actually have more resources outside of these structured, like for example, daycares or programs, because the moms will have some kind of informal network. I see that in my community on a very small scale where the libraries have a ton of programming, free programming, and a lot of the parents run like parent-led co-ops, excursions, field trips to the forest to get their kids engaged. That kind of structure is not available for quote career moms because they are working a full workday, driving to and from work, and then typically only having a couple of hours to play with their child before then putting that child to bed. So you can't have that same level of community support when you are a corporate mom, when you are a boss babe. It sounds like she might be overlooking some opportunities here to get engaged with other local moms in her community. Or maybe more accurately, she doesn't want to be a part of that community, so she's not accessing those resources or that community and that support group. The next thing she quotes is a lack of part-time work opportunities for moms that would like to work alongside parental leave. And this is interesting because it's basically assuming, I'm following her train of thought of, hey, I'm going to take 3 years off, I'd like to do some work part-time. I don't think she's truly talking about part-time work here, like going somewhere from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. because again, you'd have to solve for the problem of daycare. I think she's more literally referring to flexible work arrangements, which would be almost impossible if you're going to be clocking out for 3 months and going back to work in 3 months. If anything, having a longer maternity leave lets you set up part-time work opportunities over a longer span of time because that's how long you expect to be, I don't know, freelancing or maybe working part-time for some small business. I'll go quickly through the two next ones. Number 6 is being taken out of normal work and social life for a long period of time, which makes it hard to come back. And that's if your social life is people without kids who go to bars and restaurants. It is so important to trade that friend group. And I don't want to say trade, but the more you connect with parents who have kids, you can, you know, sit back, watch the kids play, eat a croissant, drink coffee with another mom. And if you don't go out and seek those relationships, it will be unsatisfying when you see all of your bachelor friends traveling or going to, you know, adults only resorts, doing things that you can't do with kids. In my experience, it is a ton of fun to have mom friends, but it is an active approach to go and find them. It is not something that you will passively get. You have to build out your friend group. You have to recreate a friend group for this part of your life. Lastly, she talks about how the lack of balance in the life of mothers potentially affects mental health and well-being. And there's two problems here. One is, of course, as she's talked about, the lack of balance when you choose to fully stay at home. And I would also add that probably if she does go back to work early, she'll face the additional problem of maybe people judging her in that society of like, oh, you went back to work early and your kids are still so young. So it is a double-edged double-edged sword to live in this kind of a homogeneous society. My point in disputing her earlier points is not to invalidate her experience at all, but to share what it is like to be in America, where there is a good mix of boss babes and stay-at-home moms, just by necessity, just by costs, and just by how inflexible a lot of our working conditions and employers really are. So what kind of arrangement did she work out? She writes, me personally, I started working part-time from home when my daughter was 8 months old. Now she's 15 months old and in daycare 3 days a week. So it sounds like she took both maternity leave and that parental leave fully loaded in the first 8 months. She says, I really had to fight my way for this middle road as I genuinely did not want to be a full stay-at-home mom for 3 years, but also wanted to be present while my daughter was a young baby. I've experienced a lot of mom shaming, unwanted comments. This is not something that's common where she lives. I have absolutely no hate or ill will towards moms that are happy with the long maternity leave. I would never take away their option. I'm sure this arrangement works for a lot of people and I'm happy for them. I also respect that a lot because a stay-at-home mom is a tough job. I think everyone agrees on that, like hands down. I'm just sad that it's so hard to go, quote, against the grain when wanting to do things differently. Sometimes I genuinely wish we lived in a different country. I made this post because I wanted to form my thoughts and maybe feel less alone. Rant over. So I absolutely love that she's advocating for a balanced work life. She's staying true to herself and her needs. She knows herself. And she's calling out that, hey, different arrangements work differently for different people. It sounds obvious, but basically blanket statements don't work. Having options is the most important thing. In her comments, Goldie calls out that there is no perfect country and that the biggest problem is lack of options, and that's just the summary of this whole problem. Homogeneity prevents you from finding the group that fits your own personal interests and lifestyles and balance. Magic Bumblebee says, defined fairly reasonable and available, our daycare bill for one child is almost as much as our mortgage. That is so common here. 2 kids will cost us almost 60 grand per year. Waiting lists are long AF. All of this is pretty common. Someone else says, yep, our daycare is $500 more than our mortgage. My only last words here are, whatever you choose to do, find your group. It'll make you feel a whole lot less alone, a whole lot more validated and confident, and anyways, the choices that you are making are best for you. Stay on it, my friends, and I'll see you in the next one.